Good afternoon and welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. You were just watching President Trump at the White House with EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin making an announcement to change climate rules, specifically revoking the endangerment finding rule. Also, President Trump talking about other things, answering reporter questions, and one of them is on the Save America Act, which President Trump said had three parts, which is voter ID, confirmation of U.S. citizenship, and no mail-in ballots. We'll have a panel analysis on that later in the show. But first, we're going to talk about the endangerment finding. Joining us to discuss is David Blackman, energy policy analyst and advisor and senior contributor for Forbes. So, David, good to have you on the show. So can we just hear your initial thoughts here upon hearing the revoking of the endangerment finding?
Yes, well, I mean, this day was a long time in coming. The endangerment finding never did have any real basis in American law or the Constitution, the separation of powers. It was always an overreach, as the Washington Post editorial board wrote yesterday, by the Obama administration. And it unfortunately has formed the basis of a vast array of very onerous regulatory actions by the federal government for the last 16 years now. The Trump administration has already rolled back many of those regulations from both the Obama and Biden years, but there's still much more work to be done. And this endangerment finding, declaring carbon dioxide, which is fundamental building block for all life on the planet Earth, as a pollutant under the Clean Air Act, never really had any legitimacy. And I think this is a great day for the principle of the separation of powers.
So can you just expand on that a little bit more? You said that by declaring carbon dioxide, which I might add is literally plant fluid, a pollutant, then the federal government's been able to dramatically regulate human activity. So maybe just go a little bit deeper on this issue.
That's correct. Carbon dioxide, as you said, is plant food, and really atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide through geological history have been vastly higher than they are today. Um, but the science isn't really what's at stake here. What's at stake here is whether or not you can define carbon dioxide as an actual pollutant under the terms of the Clean Air Act. John Dingell, a former representative from Michigan, was one of the authors of the Clean Air Act back in the 70s, and he criticized his own party for trying to do this because he knew that there was no real basis for making that finding under the Clean Air Act. And, if Congress or if the EPA wants to be able to regulate carbon dioxide, then it needs to ask Congress to pass another law, a different law with different terms. You're trying to equate carbon dioxide, which we all emit every time we take a breath, and every other animal on Earth does as well, in the same light as compound elements like sodium dioxide, nitrous oxide, and other actual real pollutants that are emitted from the burning of coal or natural gas to a lesser extent, and that come out of the tailpipes of cars. And so this was a huge overreach by the Obama administration. It never should have happened. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court allowed it to stand, and this is a good thing. This is a positive thing for the principle of America being a nation of laws and not peoples or politicians.
So will those things still be regulated, like, for example, CO2, without the endangerment finding?
Well, to some extent, yes, and I think people need to understand that this rescission of the endangerment finding on carbon dioxide will not do anything to lessen regulation of actual real pollutants, which have been cut back by well over 95%, every one of them since the 1970s. A coal plant today emits less than 1% of the actual pollutants it emitted 50 years ago. An automobile, less than 1/10 of 1%, and none of that's going to be rolled back. But on carbon dioxide and these big onerous regulations like the Clean Power Plan, as the Biden administration called it, which made it essentially impossible to build a new coal-fired power plant in America, which has had a pretty deleterious effect on the stability of our power grid because we don't have enough baseload generation now on our power grid, and we see all these terrible consequences during the big freeze of the last few weeks for people in certain parts of the country. That's going to change, and it's going to change for the better for people. And as the president said in his press conference, you're also probably going to see the price of cars come down because they won't have to install these stupid features like the start stop feature. Every time you come to a stop, it turns your car off and then it starts it back up. And that causes tremendous wear and tear on your engine, among many other things, and great inconvenience for the driver. And it'll cut back on the cost of building cars in the United States. So hopefully car prices will start coming down soon too.
Can I just ask you, how much do you estimate car prices could come down? Because EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin said about $2,400. How much do you think will revoking this save Americans?
Well, I think, and that's the EPA estimate of the cost of these features that have been mandated by these regulations that will now be rolled back. Hopefully it'll be at least that much. The average price of an automobile in the United States is well more than doubled since the endangerment finding was put into place in 2009. And a lot of it's because of the regulations that endangerment finding justified. So I haven't seen anybody compile a really good estimate overall of what it might mean for car prices, but it'll definitely cut back on the requirements for what has to go into a car, and that can only cut costs.
And David, can I ask you, by your analysis, did the endangerment finding lead to or have any impact on efficient combustion engine vehicles?
On internal combustion, yes. Well, the efficiency of them, I'm not sure if it had a big impact on the efficiency of the engines because these car makers and the people, their scientists in these companies are very innovative and smart people who are able to overcome any problems in that arena. But it just required more equipment on the car. One thing, we keep showing that image of the tailpipe emissions. Um, those kinds of emissions are not going to come back as a result of this. I want everyone to understand that nothing's going to change in terms of the actual pollutants coming out of the tailpipe of your car. Car makers are not going to want what this is going to free car makers up to do is to make cars people actually want to buy. But no automaker is going to want to make a car and advertise, well, this one pollutes more, so it's cheaper. They're not going to cut back on emissions controls. As a result of this, it would be, they'd get pummeled in the press for doing that. So I don't think, you know, I know there's going to be a lot of talking points against this from the environmentalist community, but this is not going to be any sort of public health or pollution disaster as a result of this rescission.
Okay, that's reassuring to hear. So just one more question here, David. How permanent do you think these actions announced today will be? I mean, could a new administration potentially just walk back these moves?
They can certainly try, and of course that's the nature of U.S. politics, right? I mean, one administration comes in and undoes what the others did. This, however, has been done through the Administrative Procedures Act, through the proper channels of the regulatory process. This is not an executive order, which is, of course, less permanent than an actual regulatory action. And so it will be difficult for a succeeding administration to go back to this, mainly because you're not going to have the endangerment finding in place that's been endorsed by the courts. So if the next president comes in and wants his EPA to go back to this, they're going to have to issue a new finding that will have to survive scrutiny by the courts. And we could go into the Chevron deference and the disappearance of that last year, or the removal of that last year by the Supreme Court. But the Chevron deference was a very key element of why the courts approved this in the first place. and it no longer exists. And so this is going to withstand scrutiny of the courts, this rescission, and trying to do it again probably won't.
Okay, good to hear your analysis. As always, David, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Border Czar Tom Homan says ICE operations are ending in Minnesota. Find out what led to the drawdown after this break.
They tried to silence us. But 5,000 years cannot be erased.
A lost world reborn. Timeless. Divine. Witness the revival. Experience the extraordinary. Live on stage. Returns to David Koch Theater, March 25th through April 12th. Get your tickets now at shenyun.com.
Senate Democrats blocked a bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security, putting the department on the brink of a shutdown.
Senate Democrats showed up today for Americans. We did what they're asking. We did our job today. Now, Republicans have to do theirs. And as you know, we have asked for very simple objectives that is overwhelmingly supported by the American people and by a very good chunk of Republicans.
Democrats blocked a full-year funding bill on a 52-49 vote. It needed 60 votes to advance. In the next vote, Senator Chris Murphy objected to a 2-week stopgap bill put forward by Senator Katie Britt.
The clerk will report.
Democrats said they blocked the legislation because a White House offer did not go far enough to reform the department's immigration enforcement tactics. Joining us to discuss the latest on the Hill is Nathan Wooster, senior reporter for the Epoch Times. So Nathan, good afternoon to you. As we saw earlier in the report, some debate on the Save America Act. I just wanted to have your thoughts on that. I brought a clip here with me of House Speaker Mike Johnson commenting on it.
Proof of citizenship and photo ID to vote. Everyone in the country understands the necessity of that, understands how simple it is and how important it is. And the only people that oppose it are people who want to cheat our system, who want to participate in our elections illegally, unlawfully. And that's not fair to the American people and the citizens of this country.
So what is your feeling on how much of a priority is the SAVE Act in Washington right now? Can you talk to us about that?
Well, I can tell you that after making it across the line in the House, the Senate has been under significant pressure. Led by Senator Mike Lee, there's been an effort, even including conservative activist Scott Presler, with whom I've spoken, to try to get as many Republicans as possible on side with this. And in fact, they are, as of this moment, at or approaching 50 co-sponsors. I spoke with some holdouts, Shelley Moore Capito, Roger Wicker, both of whom ultimately did sign on. They wouldn't necessarily call themselves holdouts, but it speaks to the intensity of the drive on this issue, which, as some would tell you, a very large number of Americans generally support, at least according to the opinion polling that I have seen. I should add, though, that when it comes to getting this across the line, the issue of possibly changing the filibuster, or not outright changing the rules, but using something known as the standing filibuster, it's not obvious that there's enough traction for that in the Senate on the Republican side.
So do you know if Leader John Thune is seriously considering this, trying to change the filibuster to try to get it passed? I mean, how serious are we talking about?
Well, the timeline here is interesting because not that long ago, Anna Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett in the House, they ultimately ended up being willing to support a bill because they were told that the Senate would consider this or act on this filibuster issue. The standing filibuster, just to put it in fairly simple terms, it would exhaust the filibuster. This is something that would take up a lot of floor time as Democrats basically just continue talking for an extended period, something that Republicans and Democrats have contemplated in the past, depending upon who's in the majority in the Senate and who controls the presidency. But as Thune and others have stressed, this is something that would, in fact, take a lot of time. On the other hand, you have people like Mike Lee suggesting, as he did on a post on X, that, well, if we can't deliver on this issue, what is more important really for our voters? So we're seeing a fair amount of pushback. On the other hand, this definitely is under discussion. That's what Shelley Moore Capito told me. She right now is one of the people uncomfortable with the idea of modifying the filibuster, but I got the sense that maybe at some future point, if there's buy-in, we could see something like a standing filibuster. And let me tell you, that would be very interesting to watch. The amount of speechifying, the amount of sheer talking that would be going on in Washington. Maybe not such a change of pace, a lot of talking in Washington, but a real test for a certain level of commitment to the Save America Act.
So this is one of the priorities for lawmakers. Another one, of course, lawmakers are trying to avoid a shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, right? I wanted to talk to you about this as well. Tomorrow is the deadline. Where do things stand right now, Nathan?
Well, I have some breaking news, which is that Leader Thune has said that the Senate is going to enter a recess now, just hours really before we will have this lapse in funding for DHS, which includes not just ICE, not just the Border Patrol, but also FEMA, TSA, and in fact, the Secret Service. So that came after a test vote, an attempt to get the appropriations bill for DHS across the line. This ended up failing on what was basically a party line vote, though John Fetterman actually broke ranks, supported the appropriations bill. There are talks going on. The White House just very recently released its own proposal, its own text. Democrats have been critical of that. Their own set of demands includes some things that likely Republicans would find it very hard to get on side with. More specifically, we have things like a demand to basically end the masking of ICE and other federal agents from Democrats. Democrats also pushing for some far-reaching reforms to warrants that defenders of ICE would say might just end up gutting their ability to actually conduct immigration law enforcement. But one interesting tidbit that I picked up from the Hill just a few minutes ago was Chris Murphy. He's a Democrat, someone who's been very critical of the administration, saying that he was open, perhaps, or suggesting he might be, to the notion of a continuing resolution, a short-term funding patch, and then having separately carved out discussions on CBP, the Border Patrol, and ICE. So those would not be funded, but everything else would be. Worth keeping in mind, of course, that even if we were to see this funding lapse, ICE and Border Patrol are amply funded through last year's One Big Beautiful Bill. So I look at that and I think, is it possible that even as the Senate is preparing to leave town, we could be seeing some 11th hour openness to negotiations from the Democrats? Time will tell, but very interesting time here on the Hill.
Okay, so there are a couple of things here. I want to follow up on your tidbit there. It's very interesting. I just want to ask you, how united are Democrats right now?
I would say, listening to Leader Hakeem Jeffries in the House just this morning in a press conference, he said that he and the Senate, they are united in the notion of not going forward with any funding unless they see what they believe to be very important reforms. On the other hand, we did see in the Senate just now John Fetterman breaking with his party. I get the sense that in the House, there are moderates who, under the right circumstances, could be talked into something. And separately, I actually spoke with the House Republican Appropriations Chair, Tom Cole, who reminded us that prior to all of this happening, the drama over DHS in the Senate, the House passed that DHS bill. And Rosa DeLauro, actually the person who originated that idea I mentioned just now of setting ICE and CBP aside, she's really been more supportive than one might expect of some sort of compromise, but something still that would bring about attention to ICE and Border Patrol, the issues that Democrats have really been focusing on. So to answer your question, there's a significant amount of unity. On the other hand, moments like that, other comments I've heard, a certain, depending upon who you speak to, openness perhaps to a funding patch. That tells me that there might be room to work with. Of course, we are very close to the deadline. I think that if I were advising someone on how to expect this will play out, I would expect the government to not entirely shut down, to have a very small partial shutdown, a small percentage of the budget, but again, things like FEMA, the TSA, as well as some of the funding out there for ICE and for Border Patrol.
Yeah, you're right. We are very close to the deadline. And you mentioned earlier potentially some 11th hour discussions. In your view, are there any realistic paths right now? Are you still holding hope here before the February 13th deadline?
I should tell you the recess announcement from Leader Thune, that certainly sounds like an attempt to end this as it is, both sides perhaps accepting the notion of an impending government shutdown. On the other hand, on the House side, we have gotten signals, for example, from Jeffries and from others, that there might be votes, might be something happening tomorrow. And it's possible that has changed just in a few minutes. Things are breaking very quickly here on this issue. But I would imagine that right now, some of the participants in talks over the DHS text from the White House, for example, on the Democratic side, you have Gary Peters of Michigan. On the Republican side, you have Katie Britt. There might be conversations happening at an intensity that didn't exist before, but really, to a large extent, all we can do is speculate and look at things like, for example, Tom Homan announcing the end of that surge in Minnesota, and ask ourselves, is this something not only that the Democrats might accept as a good faith move from the administration, is it also something that could kind of reset the public narrative around a lapse in funding for DHS? People looking at that now, weeks after the shooting of Alex Preddy, they might think, well, who is ultimately responsible for this if it seems as though the administration has been pumping the brakes? I wouldn't be surprised if Democrats are thinking about that as well.
Well, very important information you shared with us today, Nathan. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Glad to join you, Don.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. President Trump repealing the landmark 2009 legal finding that climate change poses a threat to the public, and the president has a warning for Iran. The House passes the Save America Act, what the bill aims to do to secure elections as it moves now to the Senate. Florida czar Tom Homan says ICE operations are ending in Minnesota. Find out what led to the drawdown. A new surveillance video possibly linked to the Nancy Guthrie case, and the sheriff is still declining to schedule any press briefings. A Ukrainian skeleton racer barred from competing in the Olympics. He refused to remove a helmet honoring athletes killed in the war. An IOC spokesperson explains the decision. A massive sinkhole on a busy road in Shanghai. What might have caused it at a subway construction site?
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for staying with us. The Trump administration is formally revoking the EPA's regulation known as the endangerment finding. And a day after talking Iran negotiations with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Trump warns the Iranian regime it should come to a deal very quickly. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu at the White House. Mari, good afternoon.
Don, good afternoon. That's right. At an event here in the East Room this afternoon, President Trump is touting this as the largest deregulatory action in the history of the United States. The president says that effective immediately, the EPA is repealing that landmark 2009 endangerment illegal finding that said that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions endanger public health and welfare. The president also says that the administration is terminating all additional green emission standards imposed on car models and engines between the years 2012 and 2027, and he says that that action will save American consumers trillions of dollars and will lower the cost of a vehicle to an average of by close to $3,000. Take a look.
Under the endangerment finding, they forced the hated start-stop feature onto American consumers. The endangerment finding was also used to impose the massive and really very expensive electric vehicle mandate. These crippling restrictions were a major factor in driving up car prices to unprecedented levels.
This is coming just a day after another energy event in which President Trump touted coal as America's most affordable and reliable energy source. In that event, he also signed an executive order directing the Pentagon to purchase their energy and their electricity from coal plants in order to power their military operations. Meanwhile, President Trump today is issuing a warning for Iran that a failure to reach a deal with the Trump administration would be, quote, very traumatic for the Iranian regime. This is as the Pentagon is now preparing its second aircraft carrier to be deployed to the Gulf, in addition to the USS Lincoln, which is already there. Take a look.
We have to make a deal, otherwise it's going to be very traumatic. Very traumatic. I don't want that to happen, but we have to make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time, and they got Midnight Hammer instead. And this will be very traumatic for Iran if they don't make a deal. Look, if they don't make a deal, then it'll be a different story.
President Trump's warning comes just a day after an hours-long closed-door meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. The two of them talked Iran negotiations. President Trump says that he insisted to Netanyahu that those negotiations with Iran must continue. However, the Israeli Prime Minister says he's skeptical about any deal with Iran and is lobbying the Trump administration to press Iran to scale back on its ballistic missile system and to end its support for terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. Take a look.
The president believes that the Iranians have already learned who they are dealing with. He believes that the conditions he is creating, combined with the fact that they surely understand that they made a mistake last time by not reaching an agreement, may create the conditions for achieving a good deal. He wanted to hear my opinion. I will not hide from you that I expressed general skepticism regarding the nature of any agreement with Iran. However, I said that if an agreement is indeed reached, it must include the elements that are vital to us, to Israel, and in my opinion, not just to Israel. It is not only the nuclear issue, it is also the ballistic missiles and the Iranian proxies.
Meanwhile, President Trump is touting the relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela. He's saying that the U.S. is currently dealing very well with the interim president there, Delcy Rodriguez. And this is as Energy Secretary Chris Wright is visiting Venezuela for a 3-day visit where he's pushing for expanded U.S. investment in the country. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. The Department of Transportation has issued a final rule to stop unqualified foreign truckers from driving on U.S. highways. The department is saying such drivers pose a significant safety threat to the driving public. The new rule allows only certain types of visa holders who undergo enhanced vetting to receive a commercial driver's license. Work permits from employers that do not screen for transportation safety will no longer be accepted. States must now verify applicants' immigration status through a system managed under the Department of Homeland Security. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says for far too long, America has allowed dangerous foreign drivers to abuse truck licensing systems. 7 people were killed in 2 accidents last year involving illegal immigrant truck drivers. New Jersey's governor issues an executive order limiting how federal immigration agents can use state property. Under Governor Mikey Sherrill's order, agents cannot use state property as a staging area, processing location, or a base for operations. Sherrill telling reporters the order also requires a judicial warrant for agents to enter non-public areas like state offices or facilities. The governor says New Jersey is launching a state portal for residents to submit photos or videos of ICE activity, but the public will not be allowed to view that material. She says the goal is to track patterns of enforcement which can inform the state's response, including in court. Republican Congressman from New Jersey, Jeff Van Drew, criticized the move, saying Sherrill is putting a target on the backs of federal officers. The Trump administration will limit small business loans to U.S. citizens and U.S. nationals beginning next month. Starting March 1st, green card holders and foreign nationals will no longer be eligible for loans from the Small Business Administration, or SBA. Here's more.
The SBA was established to support entrepreneurship, including counseling, capital, and contracting. Since 1953, it served as the nation's go-to agency for small businesses. Under the new rule, businesses eligible for loans must verify full ownership by U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals. Those owners must primarily live here in America. and if a business will be ineligible if it's had a foreign national stakeholder in the 6 months before the application. While the new rule prevents green card holders from receiving SBA loans, it doesn't bar non-citizens from owning businesses or procuring conventional financing from private banks.
A big night on Capitol Hill as the House passes the much-discussed Save America Act. Republicans say the legislation will help secure American elections, but Democrats say it will make voting more difficult. Here's the story.
A contentious voting bill is moving through Congress, setting up a partisan fight in the Senate over what voters will need to prove before casting their ballots.
The bill is passed without objection.
The House on Wednesday narrowly approving the Save America Act.
This is a very important night on the House floor. House Republicans tonight stood with the overwhelming majority of Americans who demand secure elections.
The Republican-led legislation would require a documented proof of U.S. citizenship in order to register to vote in federal elections. It would also require voters to furnish photo ID before voting, even when casting mail-in ballots. The vote coming down to the wire, with House members voting 218 to 213 in favor. A single Democrat, Henry Cuellar of Texas, voting with Republicans. Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, the bill's primary sponsor, stressing election integrity has broad support among the population.
It's polling at 80, 85, 90% across the country. It's because it's common sense. The American people want a sovereign nation. They understand that voter ID is common sense to vote. They want only American citizens to vote in American elections, and this legislation does that.
But the SAVE Act has been a point of contention in Congress for some time. In April last year, the Senate refused to take up a version of the same bill. Earlier this week, the House Rules Committee advancing the legislation in its current form, softening the rules on photo ID requirements and including an exception for uniformed service members. The committee's ranking Democrat, Jim McGovern of Massachusetts, arguing before the vote that it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. McGovern frames the bill as a form of voter suppression. He says Republicans' claims of widespread voter fraud don't add up.
Every time these claims are investigated, they disappear like a mirage. So this entire bill is fundamentally predicated on a lie.
The Trump administration, meanwhile, has thrown its weight behind the bill. The White House posting on X, the American elections should be decided by American citizens only. The bill now heads to the Senate, where it's expected to face strong opposition from Democrats.
And a big night on Capitol Hill as the House passes the much-discussed Save America Act. Republicans say the legislation will help secure American elections, but Democrats say it will make voting more difficult. Here's the story.
A contentious voting bill is moving through Congress, setting up a partisan fight in the Senate over what voters will need to prove before casting their ballots.
The bill is passed without objection.
The House on Wednesday narrowly approving the Save America Act.
This is a very important night on the House floor. House Republicans tonight stood with the overwhelming majority of Americans who demand secure elections.
The Republican-led legislation would require a documented proof of U.S. citizenship in order to register to vote in federal elections. It would also require voters to furnish photo ID before voting, even when casting mail-in ballots. The vote coming down to the wire, with House members voting 218 to 213 in favor. A single Democrat, Henry Cuellar of Texas, voting with Republicans. Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, the bill's primary sponsor, stressing election integrity has broad support among the population.
It's polling at 80, 85, 90% across the country. It's because it's common sense. The American people want a sovereign nation. They understand that voter ID is common sense to vote. They want only American citizens to vote in American elections, and this legislation does that.
But the SAVE Act has been a point of contention in Congress for some time. In April last year, the Senate refused to take up a version of the same bill. Earlier this week, the House Rules Committee advancing the legislation in its current form, softening the rules on photo ID requirements and including an exception for uniformed service members. The committee's ranking Democrat, Jim McGovern of Massachusetts, arguing before the vote that it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. McGovern frames the bill as a form of voter suppression. He says Republicans' claims of widespread voter fraud don't add up.
Every time these claims are investigated, they disappear like a mirage. So this entire bill is fundamentally predicated on a lie.
The Trump administration, meanwhile, has thrown its weight behind the bill. The White House posting on X, the American elections should be decided by American citizens only. The bill now heads to the Senate, where it's expected to face strong opposition from Democrats.
And as we heard earlier on Capitol Hill, the House passes the Save America Act. Joining us to discuss this is Jenny Beth Martin, honorary chairman of Tea Party Patriots Action and host of The Jenny Beth Show. And we have Robin Bureau, Democratic strategist and former Obama regional campaign director. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Jenny, I would like to start with you today. You're currently in Washington, D.C. and have been there this whole week to work with members of Congress to get the SAVE Act passed. Why do you think it's important, in your view, that this act be passed and eventually signed into law?
Well, there are three reasons for it. One, it is very simple. It requires proof of citizenship to register to vote, which will ensure that only American citizens are voting in American elections. The 86% of Americans want this. It crosses party lines, racial lines, socioeconomic lines. Every American just about wants this. You can barely get Americans to agree on apple pie more than on this. And then the other thing that it does is it requires voter ID to go when you are actually voting. So the first one is when you register to vote, which is usually only a once every few years, maybe even a decade or more experience for people. And then when you go to vote, you show a voter ID, just like you do when you get alcohol or cigarettes or go to an airplane or so many other things that we do throughout our lives. And it began because in the state of Arizona, they require proof of citizenship, but because of the way the federal law is, they can't require it for federal elections. It's kind of messed up. So we're trying to fix a problem that the Help America Vote Act or the motor voter law created initially.
So Robin, Jenny says Americans want this. Why are virtually all Democrats opposing this?
First of all, I want to congratulate Jenny Beth on getting this passed. It's a big accomplishment, and I want to recognize that. Why Democrats were opposed to it and still are opposed to it is because of perceived barriers to voting. Namely, as Jenny Beth said, this will not only require that you bring a state ID, but you have to bring another form of identification, be that a be that a birth certificate or a U.S. passport. Now, passports are a little expensive. I looked it up, Don. It's $165 to register for a passport if you don't already have one. I was a little bit surprised to learn that 48% of Americans already have a passport, but that leaves 52% that don't. That could be a financial barrier to many people. $165 is a lot to some folks. You can also bring a birth certificate. The cheapest birth certificate is $10 if you don't already have one. They go on up to $35 like my state of Georgia. That could be a financial barrier. I wish that a state ID were enough. The reason that it's not enough is because 19 very liberal states allow non-citizens to get driver's licenses. I wish that we could just make that uniform so that only an ID could be enough, like Jenny Beth said, to, you do that at a liquor store, you should be able to use a state ID should be good enough to vote.
I like just to add that you can also use real ID as well. But Jenny Beth, can you respond to this, the barriers that Robin has pointed to?
Yeah, well, a couple things. First, non-citizens can get a real ID. So a real ID alone does not does not say that you are a citizen. But the paperwork that you require for a real ID, which you have to get inside government buildings now, like Social Security offices, the paperwork for that is the same paperwork that we're talking about here. It is a birth certificate. You don't have to have a passport. If you have a passport, that works, but you don't have to have a passport. The bill also does set aside the ability that if you can have other evidence to prove that you are a citizen, you are able to attest that you are. So I think that that is going to be able to help overcome those financial objections and concerns that Democrats have expressed. So they've looked for ways to try to address some of the concerns, because what we want is to ensure two things. One, that only American citizens can vote, and to clean up the mess that is going on in Arizona right now. In the state of Arizona, if you show proof of citizenship to register to vote, you can vote from president all the way down to their lowest level, dog catcher, whatever the lowest thing on their ballot is. If, however, you have not shown proof of citizenship, you still, and this is a border state, you are still able to vote for president, Senate, and Congress. This has been challenged, gone up to the Supreme Court, and this is a solution that they've had to come up with because the Supreme Court said Congress has to fix this problem. That's That's why we started doing this, is to help fix a problem that Congress created, specifically in Arizona.
So, Robin, I hear your point that you brought up earlier, but at the end of the day, if polling shows that the majority wants voter ID, then shouldn't Democrats support it?
Yes, and I wish that we would be smart and use common sense about how we do this. I don't, for as long as I've been able to vote, I've always had to show ID, whether it was in the state of South Carolina that I grew up in or Georgia, where I currently live. I've never had a problem with that. I think that Democrats need to walk back that argument. But I do think that there needs to be, in Georgia, when you go to get a driver's license, you have to show proof of residency. That needs to be the same for all 50 states in the union. I have a problem as a Democrat with 19 states not requiring that. Like I said, my only issue, and I wish that Democrats would get on board with this, is that non-citizens can get state IDs and driver's licenses in 19 states. If we could just do that and make it so that a driver's license or state ID was enough, I think would be good. That's where we need to meet in the middle.
Okay, Jenny Beth, I brought a clip here with me that I'd like us to take a look of House Speaker Mike Johnson speaking about Senator John Thune. Let's take a look.
I trust that he is committed to it, and they're trying to figure out the right path. And I think talking filibuster is part of that discussion, and we'll see how it shakes out. So I would hope that there be some sensible Democrats there that would recognize, as one did here tonight, that this is a good policy and a good thing, and it's right. It shouldn't be a partisan issue.
Jenny Beth, Speaker Johnson brings up the filibuster. Your overall thoughts on what he said?
Well, right now, the way the bill is structured, it does not require 60 votes to bring it to the floor to begin debate on it. I really want to see debate on the bill. And I think it's very important to do that. It does not require any rules changes at all. It just would open up debate. There would be debate, and then debate would still eventually close. And there would be some sort of vote on the bill one way or the other. I think that it makes sense to do that. I think that it makes sense for the Senate to debate, period. And that should be part of, it was in the first 100 years of our country, the Senate used to have meaningful debate. And we've kind of lost that now with just calling it in with the 60 votes the way that they are operating right now. The senators are right now going through trying to figure out what this means, because they haven't been in the Senate where there's the meaningful debate that Senator Lee and other people are calling for. And so they're trying to figure out, how does this work? How do you close it? What would it mean in the future? And that's fair. They're trying to understand the process. I get that. But I think that at some point they need to bring this bill to the floor, have a real debate on it, and then let's call the question and figure out where the Democrats stand. Do they stand with the American people or not? And Robin, I think you're a lot closer to supporting this bill than you realize. The real ID, like what we were just mentioning, the real ID, again, it's another federal law that all states have to comply with. So even with a real ID, if you are a permanent resident in this country, a lawful alien in this country who has a green card, you can get a real ID. And real IDs don't differentiate between citizenship or not in almost every single state in the country. So the change you're talking about probably would solve a lot of this, but this is looking at just going at a very tiny portion of the motor voter law. It's a 32-page bill.
Jenny Beth, thank you for clarifying that point on the real ID. Robin, what do you say?
I think she's right. I think we're actually, at the end of the day, I think that we're closer to meeting in the middle on this than many Americans realize. And Jenny Beth brings up a wonderful point that we need to have discussions like this. Thank you, NTD, for bringing the two of us on so that we can have a rational discussion. More of this needs to be happening all across the nation and in the halls of Congress so that we can start getting things done that matter to Americans. I think that is against our best interests as Democrats to be so vehemently opposed to this when over 80% of Americans support some sort of ID for voting. I just would like to clarify it so there's not a financial impediment, so that people, I want to make a point. I was on TV earlier this morning, and I said, when I said that it cost $165 to get a passport, that could be a financial impediment, the other guest literally said, good, those aren't our voters. That's where I have a problem.
All right, I actually think, yeah, please.
Yeah, and I just want to be on the record, definitely don't agree with that. I want to make it easy to vote. I just want to make it hard to cheat and clear up these problems that the federal laws cause, especially in Arizona.
Well, all right. I actually think this is a very good point, a very good note to end the conversation on. So thank you so much today, Jenny Beth, Robin, for speaking with us.
Thank you for having us.
Borders Czar Tom Homan says the immigration enforcement operation in Minnesota is coming to an end. Homan says the success of the operation made it possible.
With that, and success that has been made arresting public safety threats and other priorities since this surge operation began, as well as the unprecedented levels of coordination we have obtained from state officials and local law enforcement, I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. As a result of this surge operation, we have greatly reduced the number of targets for enforcement action. And many criminal aliens have been arrested and taken off the streets, including murderers, sex offenders, national security threats, gang members, and other violent criminals. Just this week, ICE arrested a criminal alien with criminal convictions for rape, acts with a child under 14 years of age with force, lewd and lascivious acts with a child under 14. ICE also arrested 2 criminal aliens with criminal sexual misconduct convictions, among other violent criminals. In addition to taking public safety threats off the street, ICE, here in this state, have located 3,364 missing unaccompanied alien children. Children that the last administration lost and weren't even looking for. That's because of the leadership of President Trump, these children were located.
ICE launched Operation Metro Surge on December 1st. Federal authorities say the sweeps focused on the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area have led to the arrest of more than 4,000 people. Homan says that changes have enabled ending the ICE operation and discusses what comes next.
Several things have changed. First of all, when the agents were out doing operations and the agitators got a hand and posed a public safety threat, not just to the officers but to communities, law enforcement response has been sporadic at best. I think at what you've seen now, what you saw this past weekend, is law enforcement is responding to public safety needs quickly. And people were arrested for violating city ordinances as far as when unlawful assembly and so forth. They've come to assist us to make sure our officers, the person we have in custody, leave that scene safely. A small footprint of personnel will remain for a period of time to close out and transition full command and control back to the field office, as well as to ensure agitator activity continues to decline, and that state and local law enforcement continue to respond to ensure officer and community safety. Additionally, federal government personnel assigned to conduct criminal investigation into the agitators, as well as the personnel assigned here for the fraud investigations, will remain in place until the work is done.
Homan says nothing has changed on President Trump's promise of mass deportation, saying that's what the country is going to get. But Homan says it will continue to be smart law enforcement doing targeted operations. He also addresses improvements made under his watch, including personnel changes. Homan says he established a unified chain of command structure, strengthening joint intelligence and targeting capabilities, and deployed body cameras as well. The Department of Transportation has issued a final rule to stop unqualified foreign truckers from driving on U.S. highways. The department is saying such drivers pose a significant safety threat to the driving public. The new rule allows only certain types of visa holders who undergo enhanced vetting to receive a commercial driver's license. Work permits from employers that do not screen for transportation safety will no longer be accepted. States must now verify applicants' immigration status through a system managed under the Department of Homeland Security. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says for far too long, America has allowed dangerous foreign drivers to abuse truck licensing systems. 7 people were killed in 2 accidents last year involving illegal immigrant truck drivers. New Jersey's governor issues an executive order limiting how federal immigration agents can use state property. Under Governor Mikey Sherrill's order, agents cannot use state property as a staging area, processing location, or a base for operations. Sherrill telling reporters the order also requires a judicial warrant for agents to enter non-public areas like state offices or facilities. The governor says New Jersey is launching a state portal for residents to submit photos or videos of ICE activity, but the public will not be allowed to view that material. She says the goal is to track patterns of enforcement which can inform the state's response, including in court. Republican Congressman from New Jersey, Jeff Van Drew, criticized the move, saying Sherrill is putting a target on the backs of federal officers. The Trump administration will limit small business loans to U.S. citizens and U.S. nationals beginning next month. Starting March 1st, green card holders and foreign nationals will no longer be eligible for loans from the Small Business Administration, or SBA. Here's more.
The SBA was established to support entrepreneurship, including counseling, capital, and contracting. Since 1953, it served as the nation's go-to agency for small businesses. Under the new rule, businesses eligible for loans must verify full ownership by U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals. Those owners must primarily live here in America, and a business will be ineligible if it's had a foreign national stakeholder in the 6 months before the application. While the new rule prevents green card holders from receiving SBA loans, it doesn't bar non-citizens from owning businesses or procuring conventional financing from private banks.
Two U.S. Navy ships colliding yesterday during a replenishment at sea. U.S. Southern Command tells NTD that two personnel reported minor injuries and are in stable condition. The collision involves the guided missile destroyer USS Truxtun and a supply-class fast combat support ship. Southern Command's areas of responsibility include Central and South America and the Caribbean. Officials are not specifying where the collision occurred. Both ships have reported sailing safely. The incident is currently under investigation. A federal judge has denied the BBC's request to halt discovery in President Trump's $10 billion lawsuit. Trump is suing the British broadcaster for splicing parts of a speech, making it appear he directed supporters to storm the Capitol in 2021. U.S. District Judge Roy Altman denied the BBC's application to stay the discovery phase. The process allows both sides to obtain evidence from other parties in a lawsuit. Altman ruled that the BBC application was premature. In a separate order, the judge set a 2-week trial date for February 2027. Trump has accused Britain's publicly owned broadcaster of defaming him after its report omitted a lengthy section in which the president called for peaceful protest. The BBC argues that Trump can't prove damages because he was re-elected after the story aired. A pair of women's rights groups is making waves in California with an eye-catching campaign to raise awareness about men being housed in women's prisons. The statewide billboard truck campaign is calling attention to the upcoming rape trial of a man accused of assaulting 2 women in the female prison he was allowed to transfer into. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with the executive director of Women to Women about the campaign.
This week, advocacy groups Women Are Real and Woman to Woman launched a statewide billboard truck campaign across California to raise awareness about men being housed in women's prisons under Law SB 132. SB 132 was authored by State Senator Scott Wiener and signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom. It allows men to be housed in women's prisons if they say they are transgender.
Since there are no requirements within any of the gender self-ID policies, this just allows for anyone, whether they're in transition or not, to transfer. So what this translates to is there's just regular men with beards and tattoos from head to toe. They're walking around women's prisons.
The mobile billboards feature stark messages including women in California prisons raped by male inmates, and SB 132, state-sanctioned rape, media silent.
I use this term specifically, state-sanctioned rape, because this is exactly what it is. Our legislators were fully aware. If you have a working brain, you would know that giving people free range to gender self-ID within the carceral system is going to lead to people gaming the system and taking advantage of an opportunity. Why wouldn't they?
Amy Ichikawa is the executive director of Woman to Woman. She knows the correctional system all too well, having spent 5 years in Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla. These days, women are facing a new threat that wasn't present when she did her time.
In early 2024, I received several phone calls about a couple of rapes that took place within a 24-hour period in this Central California Women's Facility.
The Billboard campaign is drawing attention to the upcoming trial of the man accused of those rapes. Tremaine Carroll was transferred to the Chowchilla Women's Correctional Facility after claiming to be transgender after 22 years in a men's prison. The judge in his rape trial ordered the prosecutor to refer to Carroll by she/her pronouns. Ichikawa says many of the men who have transferred into women's prisons are sex offenders.
There's hundreds of people on the waiting list, many of whom are registered sex offenders. 33.8% of the original transfer requests were registered sex offenders.
She says many female prisoners fear for their safety, sleeping in 8-bed dorms with the male inmates.
Well, just knowing the nature of their crimes, their size, the fact that they know above all their feelings will be prioritized over women's safety and well-being.
She says they are also afraid to speak out.
Women just don't want to talk about it anymore because they've seen what happens to the women who have spoken up. They see what happens when you do stand up for yourself or you do file a formal complaint, you get your privileges taken, you lose honor dorm privileges. Some people even lose parole suitability grants.
Ichikawa says the medical aspect is also disturbing.
There's women that have to petition the courts to get basic health care needs while these individuals that are trans-identified are prioritized and no questions asked. Facelifts, nose jobs, cheek and chin implants, Rogaine for, their male pattern baldness.
From 2017 to 2023, the California corrections system spent nearly $2.5 million on vaginoplasty and around $600,000 in breast implants, facial feminization, and laser hair removal. SB 132 is called the Transgender Respect Agency and Dignity Act. The legislation is described by its creators as allowing incarcerated transgender, non-binary, and intersex people to be housed and searched in a manner consistent with their gender identity. Ichikawa says Woman to Woman, Women Are Real, and other groups will continue to fight it.
Historically, there hasn't been anyone to defend incarcerated women who are the pawn in this game that the powers and principalities are playing. But we're not going to stop. Women are reals, woman to woman. We're not going to stop.
The truck campaign opposing it has traveled through San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento. A truck will also travel to Central California Women's Facility on Friday. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
In the Nancy Guthrie search, authorities continue to comb the area for clues that will lead to recovery. Meanwhile, her daughter, Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, posting a video of her mother to Instagram this morning. NTD's Arlene Richards has the latest.
Today Show host Savannah Guthrie posting a family video of her mother, Nancy Guthrie, on Thursday morning. The video comes after investigators set up a white tent outside the front entryway of her mother's home. But the tent was taken down a short while after it was set up. Authorities made no statement about what the tent was for, and it's the 12th day since Nancy Guthrie disappeared, and authorities have ramped up their search for clues. Forensic investigators arrived at the home of Nancy Guthrie on Thursday. The investigators were seen taking forensic equipment out of their car.
Terrain is unbelievably hard to search. Even like a shell casing in grass is unbelievably hard to find without a metal detector. It's really difficult when you're outside searching for evidence.
Late yesterday, investigators found at least one glove, maybe two, near Nancy Guthrie's house.
One of the FBI agents with a bag, and he put the black object in the bag. It wasn't until later when I saw the high-resolution photos that the photographer had taken that we did realize that it was a glove.
Fox News reports that a set of gloves were found. Meanwhile, investigators are asking Nancy Guthrie's neighbors for doorbell footage from two specific time periods.
People's doorbells will rarely, if ever, see their neighbor's driveway or their door. So I'm not at all surprised that Ring doorbells didn't really capture anything.
Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos told 13 News Wednesday night that more detainments are likely as investigators work through thousands of calls and tips. A man was detained on Tuesday night in Rio Rico as part of the ongoing investigation. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
It's a special moment when you make it to the Olympic podium, and it's extra special when you share the podium with your teammate. U.S. freestyle skiers Elizabeth Lemley and Jaylyn Koff are celebrating exactly just that.
To share the podium with teammates is always just extra special. Like, you see everything that they go through to get there. And like, I mean, Liz, I coached at summer camp when you were like, I don't know, 10 years old. Like, I've like watched Liz's entire career. And so to like share the Olympic podium with her it's really, really cool.
20-year-old American freestyle skier Elizabeth Lemley is making her Olympic debut. She captured gold with a score of 82.3, and it's the second Olympics for her teammate, 29-year-old Jaylyn Koff. She took silver with a score of 80.77, after also taking silver in the last Winter Games in Beijing. Lemley says her teammates are like family to her, and she couldn't have done so well without them. This is the first time American women have taken both gold and silver in freestyle skiing in the Olympics. The two athletes will also compete in the women's dual freestyle skiing later during the Games. The event is making its first Olympic debut. A Ukrainian athlete barred from competing in the Olympics today. The skeleton racer refusing a last-minute plea from the International Olympic Committee. He's told not to wear a helmet that honors more than 20 athletes and coaches killed in the war with Russia. Here's more.
Ukrainian skeleton athlete Vladislav Heraskevich was disqualified from the Winter Olympics after he pushed to wear a helmet honoring athletes killed in the war with Russia. The International Olympic Committee announced the decision after a meeting with Heraskevich early Thursday morning. It had said the helmet of remembrance, depicting 24 dead athletes, violated rules on political statements at the Games. Heraskevich was barred and stripped of his accreditation minutes before competition was due to start at the sliding venue. His team said they would appeal at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The IOC offered for him to instead show the helmet before and after the race and wear a black band while competing. But Heraskevich said prior to the decision that he would not waver and, quote, betray the fallen athletes.
I think and truly believe that we are here today, we are able to enjoy sport and enjoy Olympics. It's also because of their sacrifice. And I believe they deserve to be here today with me, and also they deserve to be with me in a competition day.
Country President Volodymyr Zelensky showed his support for Heraskevich on X, thanking him for, quote, reminding the world of the price of our struggle. The decision sparked anger amongst Ukrainians at the Games.
It's absolutely unfair. This is reality. This is really happening. It's not a joke. It's not made up. It's real.
Back home in Kyiv, Irina Potts, the artist behind the helmet, said more than 100 athletes have been killed in the war.
That is why I definitely took on this work, to remind the world that we had athletes who could have been standing on the podium there today. Perhaps they could even have won medal, but they are no longer with us.
We dearly wanted him to compete.
Spokesperson Mark Adams says the rules were always clear.
We were happy to provide him with a number of occasions to express his grief. Athletes themselves have asked for a safe space to compete, and this is what we have done.
Speaking earlier in the week, Heraskevich argued that the IOC rule doesn't apply in this case. He said he believed the rule was about harassment, but instead he wanted merely to pay tribute to former members of the Olympic family.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte opening a meeting today of NATO defense ministers in Brussels. He's emphasizing continued support for Ukraine, increased defense spending, and the upcoming launch of Arctic Sentry.
NATO is always on duty to deter and defend. This is why we have just launched Arctic Sentry, giving Russia's increased military activity and China's growing interest in the High North. We will also discuss our continued support for Ukraine. As the United States continues to drive efforts to bring the war to a just and lasting end.
Arctic Sentry is the European response to U.S. security concerns in the high north. It aims to counter Russian and Chinese activities or influence in the region. Drills that are already underway, like those run by Denmark and Norway, will be brought under the NATO umbrella. Rutte also noted that he's seen a significant increase in allies' defense spending. The Secretary General said allies will discuss enhancing deterrence and defense postures, including integrated air and missile defense. WhatsApp has been completely blocked in Russia. The Kremlin saying today the messenger app failed to comply with local law. It suggests Russians turn to a state-backed national messenger instead. Critics say the national messenger app Max is a surveillance tool, which authorities deny. The move aims to go against WhatsApp is on the culmination of 6 months of pressure on the company. It reflects a wider push by Russian authorities to have foreign-owned tech companies submit to local laws or disappear. WhatsApp reacts to the ban, calling it a backwards step. Foreign brand vehicles are continuing to reach Russia through China despite sanctions imposed after the invasion of Ukraine. Reuters reports tens of thousands of cars, including Toyota, Mazda, BMW, and Mercedes models, are entering the market through gray market channels. Dealers say some vehicles are registered as used cars even with zero mileage. That allows exporters to bypass automaker restrictions. Reuters reports that many of the cars are built in China or shipped through the country before heading to Russian buyers. One Moscow dealership says customers still want Western brands, but imports now rely on indirect channels. Automakers say they prohibit exports to Russia. Analysts note that enforcement is difficult across complex global trade networks. A massive sinkhole appearing on a busy road in Shanghai on Wednesday. It's above a subway construction site. Nearby buildings and construction materials have been swallowed into the sinkhole, which is estimated to be about 65 feet wide and 15 feet deep. Due to a ruptured underground pipe, some debris is floating in water. The site is located in a densely populated business area just minutes by car from Shanghai's international airport. The incident has caused heavy traffic in the surrounding commercial area. No injuries have been reported so far. Authorities say that a day before the collapse, a groundwater leakage was detected at the subway construction site. They are suspecting that the leakage has caused the sinkhole. A Japanese plastics manufacturer is opening a plant in Texas. The $40 million facility is being built in San Antonio. Sanko Texas Corporation broke ground Wednesday on its first U.S. manufacturing facility. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's press office took to X, posting, quote, "Advanced manufacturing is coming back to America. Texas products power the world." San Antonio's mayor expressed her support for the plant as well. A local county judge said the new facility will employ a total of 1,500 people. Sanko said 300 of those positions will be filled by San Antonio residents. Construction is expected to be completed by 2027. The CIA is now openly trying to recruit Chinese military officers as informants. This comes just weeks after Beijing purged one of its top generals. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley is live with more. Jack, what's in this video, and what does it tell us about how the U.S. is viewing the latest military shakeup in China?
Good afternoon, Don. Well, the CIA appears to be capitalizing on that recent military shakeup in China. With this new video, it's seeking informants in China's military. Look, if you're a general or a high-level Chinese military officer right now, you may not have the most job security, because over the past few months, the CCP has been removing dozens of senior officers and placing them under investigation. Now, just weeks ago, 2 top commanders were removed, including Xi Jinping's second-in-command. That leaves China's Central Military Commission from 6 down to 2 members him left, including the big man Xi himself. Now, today, the CIA released this video showing a disillusioned mid-level member of the Chinese military and how he's fed up with the party. Take a look.
这是我熟悉的世界，保家卫国，保护人民。然而日复一日，真相越发显而易见。领导们真正在保护的，只有他们自己的私利。他们的权力建筑在无数的谎言上，但现在这些谎言壁垒逐渐坍塌，最后留下给我们的就是收拾残局。 任何有领导能力的人必定遭受忌惮，被无情绞杀。我不能让这些狂人来塑造我女儿未来的世界。
Now, at the end of that video, it leaves a secure contact number to get in touch with the CIA. And it's part of the CIA's broader effort that started last May that sent out a couple of videos with instructions into mainland China on how to securely contact U.S. intelligence. CIA Director John Ratcliffe says that those videos had reached many Chinese citizens. Here he is explaining the impetus behind this campaign.
So the way to counter China is to go on offense. And so we released two Mandarin-speaking videos to the Chinese people, inviting them to contact us through the dark web, because a lot of the people in China are not happy with what's happening, and they can be, great sources of intelligence for us. We'll have more people inside, behind China's Great Wall, and giving us intelligence and information on what's happening with the PRC and its ruling party, the Chinese Communist Party.
Now, with these recent military purges among China's leadership, the CIA appears to believe that someone inside the military in China may be willing to talk. Don?
And Jack, the War and Agriculture departments are teaming up over concerns about Chinese companies buying U.S. farmland. Why is the Pentagon getting involved in cornfields?
Well, because officials say that it's not just about corn, it's national security. That farmland is usually purchased next to sensitive military sites. Yesterday, the Secretaries of War and Agriculture signed a new agreement to protect American farmland from CCP-linked companies, among other adversaries, from espionage, but also protecting the food supply. Take a look.
Something people may not know is that shortly after 9/11, U.S. forces in Afghanistan uncovered al-Qaeda training manuals that specifically targeted America's agriculture for attack. Bottom line is, we're not dealing with hypotheticals here. The threat is real, it is asymmetric, and it must be neutralized.
China alone owns 265,000 acres of American agricultural land. Back in 1983, it was only 2,000 acres. These actions expose strategic vulnerabilities in America's food and agriculture supply chain. Thankfully, President Trump, the first president to truly understand that protecting the homeland must begin with protecting our farmland.
Now, under the agreement, the Pentagon will coordinate with the USDA, their scientists, to identify and stop those threats. The USDA is also launching a whole new office. It's focused on safeguarding agricultural research. Officials say that the partnership will also tighten reviews of foreign investments in agricultural technology and food supply chains. Now, they say that the adversaries to the U.S. don't just target the battlefields. Here, they target systems that feed and sustain the country. Don, back to you.
Okay, Jack, thank you.